In 1975, Kodak invented the digital camera. 37 years later, Kodak went bankrupt. This is the story of how inventing the future isn't enough to save you from it. For most of the 20th century, Kodak wasn't just a company. It was photography itself. Think about it. If you took a photo, it was probably on Kodak film. If you developed a picture, you were using Kodak chemicals. The whole ecosystem was under their control. At their absolute peak, Kodak controlled over 90% of the film market in the United States. They were a titan. And internally, they held one belief sacred: photography would always mean film. That single idea shaped every decision they made. And it would ultimately become their fatal flaw. Then, in 1975, an engineer inside Kodak named Steven Sasson created something that would change everything. He built a camera with no film. It needed no chemical processing. The images were stored digitally. He had invented the world's first digital camera. When he presented this breakthrough to Kodak's executives, their reaction wasn't excitement, it was confusion. They asked him a question that would haunt the company for decades. Why would anyone ever want to view their photos on a TV screen? They just couldn't see the future, even when one of their own had built it. But here's the real twist. Kodak didn't ignore digital photography because they didn't understand the technology. They ignored it because they understood its business implications all too well. Digital photography was a direct threat to their entire profit model. Their business was built on selling film, chemicals, and printing services, all things that made them a fortune. Digital photos meant no more film sales, no more chemical processing, no more paying for reprints. For Kodak, digital didn't just replace film. It completely destroyed the revenue stream that made them a giant. So the leadership team made a calculated and ultimately fatal decision. They feared that succeeding in the digital space would cannibalize their own profits. So they chose to delay. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, while the digital revolution was quietly brewing, Kodak doubled down on its past. They poured billions into improving film technology, making it sharper, developing it faster, and building bigger printing labs. They were perfecting a dying art. Meanwhile, their competitors were looking forward. Sony jumped into the digital camera market with both feet. Canon and Nikon, giants in their own right, adapted their strategies quickly. Slowly but surely, consumers started changing their habits. But Kodak remained convinced that their film empire would dominate for years to come. By the early 2000s, the digital dam broke. The explosion was immediate and overwhelming. Consumers fell in love with the magic of digital. Instant photos, no development costs, and the ability to share images effortlessly. Finally, Kodak was forced to react. But reacting is a world away from leading. They found themselves in an impossible position, trying to compete in the new digital camera market while desperately trying to protect their shrinking film profits. This internal conflict created a contradiction that paralyzed the company, slowing every move they made. Kodak's entire business model was built on a simple, brilliant formula: sell cheap cameras to lock customers into an ecosystem of expensive, high-margin consumables like film and printing. It was the classic razor and blades model. But digital photography shattered that model completely. There were no more consumables, no more repeat purchases, and no more locked-in customers. Then came the final blow: the smartphone. Photography suddenly moved from dedicated cameras to the phones in our pockets, and then to social media platforms. Kodak wasn't a software company. It wasn't a platform company. In this new world, it had no ecosystem left to control. In the final years, Kodak attempted a flurry of last-ditch pivots. They tried making printers. They ventured into medical imaging. They even tried to license their vast portfolio of patents. But nothing could replace the massive, consistent revenue that film had once provided. By the time Kodak finally decided to go all-in on digital, the race was already over. Their competitors had not just started. They had already crossed the finish line and owned the market. The painful truth was that innovation without execution had cost them everything. In 2012, the inevitable happened. Kodak, the company that had once defined an entire industry and captured the memories of generations, filed for bankruptcy. The giant had fallen. Kodak didn't fail because it missed the future or lacked innovation. It failed because it was too busy protecting its past to build a new one. And that leaves us with one brutal but powerful lesson. Inventing the future doesn't matter if you're too afraid to let go of the present. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.